action during the closed session, and there is nothing to report, so I need a motion to adjourn.
So we'll second.
Kulat and Hopkins, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries unanimously. All right, we are now back to our second meeting. And Shannon is going to do a roll call for the planning and zoning.
Right. So Chairwoman Brunig. Here. Commissioner Maggio. Here. Commissioner Post is absent. Commissioner Summer. Commissioner Wade. Commissioner Erickson is absent. Commissioner Nopens.
Here.
Commissioner Albrecht.
Present.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
All right, thank you. All right, Brad, where do we start with this now?
Mr. Benjamin McKinney with us from Sewer Tech. I think it's going to do an overview of what our actions are for updating that. Open up for discussion.
All right, welcome, Mr. McCabe.
We brought a brief handout that provides 4 different options that the commission does provide. To update the comprehensive plan. That's this sheet here, probably just the top sheet. That's, I think, the only part we're really interested in tonight. So I'll go over the 4 different options like this, and then maybe identify key things that were pointed out to by the village that you were concerned about, and then we can open it up for discussion. The first 2 options on this sheet are probably not going to be appropriate for what I think the village is going to need to do. The first option is to basically reaffirm that the existing comprehensive plan is still working for the community, definitely needs to be updated, and then community adopts a resolution saying that. However, obviously, a lot has happened in the village over the last 10 years. This first option would be more for community where not much development has happened, not a whole lot is going on. So that's probably not gonna work for the village. Option number 2 is really where we focus pretty directly just on updating the land plan map in your comprehensive plan with a few other additional items. That is the least costly update option. It's $1,025. But again, I think you have quite a few items that you want to cover, so this might not work well either. So I think likely it might be option number 3 or option number 4 on this sheet that would help you address some of the things that Brad has talked to me about. The commission staff an email outlining some of the major concerns. So there's a pretty big cost difference between the option number 3 and option number 4. Option number 3 is $5,000 to $7,500. I was thinking for the village, because of some of the complexities of the land use plan map and the phasing and things like that, it might be on the high end of that range. So we would begin for option number 3, focus on updating the land use plan map, as well as including some basic planning data, so some socioeconomic data. I talked about the timing of the census a little bit here as well. And also updating some of the key natural resource data, again, planning data. And then option number 4 is what I think we would do is kind of follow the format of your existing elements in 2035 comprehensive plan and update the entire plan. The cost of that option number 4 full update run community is $15,000 to $25,000, and again, based on some of the complexities in the plan, it'll probably be on the higher end of that range for the village. So a couple of concerns or items that were pointed out to be addressed in the email that I received from Brad. One of those being looking at developing more flexible land use categories. So I was expressing that a lot of amendments have had to be done, maybe a lack of flexibility in the land use categories, and they might look at a few different things to do, but I did take a look at the plan today, and it looks like particularly residential land use categories and maybe the commercial categories are very specific, when sometimes in the comprehensive plan, you can be more broad as long as your land use categories are essentially aligning appropriately with the zoning. Of course, we would incorporate the village of Silver Lake land use plan that into the current plan, so the town and village, or the former town and village land use plan has to become one. Village of Salem Lakes land use plan map. If we did a full update, we could update the entire 15-chapter report as it's been constructed for what was the town of Salem. Something that we've been doing for communities that we've worked with, finished up working with, is actually combining some of their existing chapters, so some of the chapters that are real specific inventory data, we combine with the appropriate actual plan items that sets forth the goal of the programs. But either way, although we chose to do it, we could entirely update the report. That's the way that the village to go. Some other items that were pointed out to me would be maybe looking at a need for additional housing might be affordable to a wider range of households that may be looking, for instance, at where how much land is identified for maybe higher density housing as opposed to low density housing, which could tend to be a little bit more affordable to a wider range of households. Also, it was identified that maybe more commercial development might be appropriate along state highways 50 and 83, as well as highway C. And then there was a discussion regarding potentially removing the phasing element of your plan, and as opposed to having phases, one design year land use plan map, which again might simplify things a little bit to maybe reduce the kind of conflicts with development proposals come forward. So those are the basic options, and those are some of the areas that were highlighted from Brad that we probably certainly want to take care of. Just a couple other kind of housekeeping items. One of the requirements in the state comprehensive planning laws to have a public participation plan for comprehensive plans, which the village does in this document, the existing 2035 plan. The commission has actually developed a sample public participation plan for a comprehensive plan amendment specifically, which is a little again more simplified of a document. It basically just states that the village is going to do the one public hearing that it needs to do per the state statutes, as well. Of course, that probably can be noticed properly with the 30-day public notice and conducted properly, and that provides options for doing additional public input, whether it's open houses or whatever it might be, that would be probably appropriate for doing the entire plan update. One other item, we would also update the design year of the plan in 2050, so that would be consistent with commission population projections and other important data. And a side note on data, the census data, the 2020 decennial census data is coming out a little bit later this year than it has in past years. Redistricting data, I think, need to be provided by the states by the end of March, I believe, and then usually 2 or 3 months after that, community level data, like for the Salem Lakes, would come out. Right now, I think the Census Bureau is shooting for September 30th for getting states redistricting data. So if you can kind of saying that, it's probably we're looking at the end of this year before the community level decennial census data comes out. And that's kind of basic data. A lot of another census product that we rely on pretty heavily is called the American Community Survey, or ACS. And that's where you get some of the more detailed socioeconomic data, whether it's kind of income, economy related. The decennial census data is pretty basic. It's just usually population, age, maybe housing units, and tenure, and not a lot more than that. So the ACS data is actually pretty important. For a community the size of Village Salem Lake, the ACS data comes out on a rolling 5-year average. I think what we'll probably have available to us will be from the years 2015 to 2019. We're a little unsure how the decennial census rate is going to impact of updated ACS data, so when I have more information on that, I can share that with you, but that's where it looks like we are right now for release of census data. At the community level is likely to be pretty late this year. Last kind of housekeeping item is that I don't know if the village is already doing it, but 2 years ago, state comprehensive planning law was updated to require communities to keep a list of interested parties in comprehensive plan changes that may impact their allowable land use. One of the pieces of this requirement is that this list and how to get on the list needs to be noticed once a year. There's 3 ways of doing that set forth in the state statutes. One of those being through a public notice that will come out annually. The other would be community-wide mailing. And the other, and probably the most popular way, which a few communities have started doing, including Sonoma County, is to include a notice on the community website, probably where you have a comprehensive plan posted. And it can be pretty simple, just like one line sentence saying that this list exists and who to contact to get on the list. And we can provide some sample language for that if you'd like to follow that. So I think that's all that I had in the presentation. I'd be happy to take questions or just open things up to discussion.
Yeah, I got a question for you. So as you were going on in your talking about these 4 options in front of us, and you kind of ruled out options 1 and 2, when you got to option 3, you were specifically addressing the town of Salem CMP, and it wasn't until you got to option 4 where you started to include Silver Lakes, which is nothing more than the counties. So are you suggesting then that really what you're asking us to do is to approve 4 so that it includes Silver Lakes updates into the quote Salem Lakes CMP?
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on that. We would include the Silver Lake map in the update to I guess we should call it how the new village of Salem Lakes comprehensive plan. That would be done under option 3.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry if I wasn't clear on that point.
Questions?
I would point out that we would actually, if you did want to go the option 2 route, where really all you're doing is looking and updating your map in here, and maybe if there's concerns about the phasing, removing the phasing, we would include the portion of the former village of Silver Lake as well under the option 2. So any option that you would choose, we would make sure we consolidate those 2.
Okay.
Together.
Thank you.
How will this pertain to our sewer service area? We have now doubled the capacity of our treatment plant. That's something we've done simultaneously, or is that two different process?
Yeah, if you were to do a sewer service area amendment, that would be its own independent process, but typically, the way that it's happened in the past is the commission would like to see whatever would be done in the comprehensive plan occur, and then when the sewer service area amendment comes forth, that amendment would be then consistent with whatever it is that you've done in your comprehensive plan.
I just bring it up because I think Dennis, you probably remember when we did the neighborhood planning. The main reason we did it is to have the remainder of the town added to the sewer service area. And now that we got neighborhood planning, the 2050 plan, we got the capacity. It's just one less step to do when a developer comes to us. I want to tell them, well, it's a 6-month process. Get the sewer service area amended, and, when they will start building the farm.
We can certainly talk about the timing for doing the sewer service area. That's like I talked to our chief land use planner, who his name is Joe Vito, who will be actually probably coming in on this project if you choose to work with the commission. He couldn't be here this evening because of work this on. But yeah, we can certainly talk about how to kind of set the process up, but they are.
No other questions?
Well, we spent in the neighborhood of $400,000 to create our plan when we did it. So the cost of what we're looking at here, I think, is pretty insignificant really to to what we did, obviously at $25,000 or $30,000 to redo not necessarily redo it, but to update it, make it not significant changes, but there is one big significant change, and that would be neighborhood number 12, which would be Silver Lake, and then incorporating all that in. I personally think that the number 4 would be more appropriate for what we have here with the invested in this to begin with.
And we did budget a full amount for number 4.
Yep.
Mike?
I was just gonna say, and I totally agree with Dennis, the cost seems to me insignificant for what we're looking at. And this just goes right along with what we talked about for probably the last couple of years since the bill's been on. I think we've talked about it forever, but updating our plan and figuring out what we want, where and how. When we tried this one exercise once before and it didn't go anywhere, but I think we need to come up with a plan and, you know, figure out how we're gonna get the things in here we want. We still want some more retail, some commercial areas. I know we're gonna be looking at some residential areas, but I would love to update the whole plan and spend, if it's 25, if 30 grand, I'm all for it.
Changes you want to see in the map, and it's probably gonna have 10 different opinions, if not more. You know, something you would coordinate and you would plan commission work together.
Yeah, so the sewer pack staff would definitely provide assistance in holding like any open house type meetings that you would want to hold. And we could bring, you know, display size maps, and if you wanted to be as a sort of workshop where people even sit down and have a chance to write things up, we could certainly do that. And we can do those types of activities with the plan commission and the board, and we can also open those up to the public as well. So, and I would suggest doing more than the public hearing for the plan update. That would probably not be.
Dan?
Well, I'm not as much concerned about the expense of number 4. I think that's reasonable for us, but it's really something that we need to do. The option number 4 is truly what we have to do to update the plan so that we have a 2021 comprehensive amendment to the existing one. So I'm for that option number 4.
Does this change the date? I know it doesn't change the date at all or anything. I mean, you're gonna go through everything like that. Can we push it out any longer, or is that just going, that's 35 still?
No, we go to 2050.
2050.
Oh, you do?
Yep, 2050, but we're also waiting for the survey that was just recently done. That's not been finalized yet, right? The census.
See, and that's my question. How long does this process take? And if you're saying that we're not going to see the local data until December, are you intending to include that data then in this update?
Well, I think that we should include that data in this update, so we got to kind of strategically think about when we want to start and then when do we start on. So if we do a full update, there is a lot of data in here that doesn't have anything to do with the census. It's all, you know, natural resource data and actually a lot of, you know, data that SewerPack itself is kind of the steward of. So we can start those pieces of work prior to the census, but then when you're really looking at your land use plan map and you're trying to determine, you know, what acreage of various land use categories do we really want to see? You may want to be aware of that census data. However, you know, I think what we could certainly start doing though before we have the census data as it applies to the land use plan map is try to determine if simplification of the map is something that you may want to do. I don't know if there's the map is somewhat complex. It has very detailed, particularly residential land use categories. And maybe other land use categories. I don't know if that's caused delays in development in the past, but we could certainly start thinking about how to simplify the map, and if you want to remove the phasing part of the map, how to do that. So there's work that we can do ahead of the census, but I think that you would likely want to come to that census data.
Well, I think one of the reasons that we did the neighborhoods is so we could really not attack, might not be the right word, but to really put some thought into this particular area and then move on to the next one. So maybe a place to start would pick out a couple of the neighborhoods and then have everybody review And then I'm in favor of having public hearings again for that neighborhood to see if some new things come to light with people that now own property there. And
Yeah, I think we could combine some of the neighborhoods, do like 3 neighborhoods for one public hearing. We don't need a public hearing.
right, there may not be major changes. There might be one where it's very, very little change.
I agree with what you're saying, Danny, but I think you gotta go to the 35,000 foot perspective. The village is made up of what, 5 or 6 different communities, not neighborhoods?
Well, those communities are in those neighborhoods.
I know, but when you take Shorewood versus Silver Lake, the idea is a 35,000 foot perspective gives you the opportunity to work with it easier than focusing narrowly on pockets of areas.
Well, I think we're probably saying the same thing. If you looked at the neighborhood, it would be a logical, it might be Salem and it might be Wilmot is in the one, Salem's in another one, Silver Lake most certainly, they would be in there.
Yeah, and I would recommend combining them because Pat Mooney used Highway 83 to divide them up. But we want to look at both sides of 83 at the same time, not look at the east side.
Right.
For a month, and then look at the west side.
And obviously, this will take a lot of board involvement from planning commission also, because obviously they're gonna be coming to you if we get it wrong, so. One of the things that's really changed drastically, I think, in the village, obviously, with the combining the Silver Lake, we took on that area, that's a whole new world over there. It has its own little ideas and thoughts, and now we gotta combine it and bring it all into one. I think we're getting out of, I think the board has really given us some direction to get out of the residential along 83 and 50 and get more into commercial. And, so I just think times have changed. And I think that's what people want to see, in the village, they want to see some commercial instead of all the rooftops. And so we want to just take some of those areas and figure them, we don't want to price ourselves out of residential subdivisions, but our Highway 50, our Highway 83, Highway C corridors, those really, the business part, and, different things, Highway B, on that north end of Highway 50, some of those areas that we really want to look at.
And look at it again, I totally agree. Highway 83, I was always a little concerned about that. It's our highway I-94 from Illinois.
Mhm.
And we had multiple housing developments planned. And I always felt that retail or commercial of some sort would be more appropriate. And the reality is now we do have a couple of things that have happened with the Dollar General and on the other side of the road. And it's progressing in that way. And you don't see any apartment buildings along here. And I agree with what you say. And
I
that's,
just see a lot of people, they either call us or they come in and look, and they look at the current 2035 plan and they just go elsewhere, so they don't want to go through the process. So if it was already set up and planned for them, I think it would help us out. If it's only board, would help everyone out if it was more to what the board feels current.
And adding an additional commercial actually gives me an opportunity to add more affordable housing right behind it. And we transition from commercial to affordable housing to residential. So, a logical transition.
and we had one individual, I forget what neighborhood it is, but it's off of Highway C. And Dennis, the road from Ziggy will eventually go through his property. Recall what I'm talking about?
Sheen.
Sheen, yes. And that was originally planned, his property, for like an R3 zoning, 20,000 square foot. And I recall we changed that, I think, to an R5 or whatever, because it would have a real impact on the value of his property. And so we gave him a denser property, which would be the affordable homes or housing
I
there.
think he went from R2 to R3. We did that because we had a view of
Park.
Right.
Yep. But didn't the park stay there?
Park is still.
Yeah.
Still in there. That's something else we probably would.
I think that our mindset has changed in the last obvious 20 years that we developed this, and there's some parks there that could actually be eliminated.
Yeah, you got that property on 83rd Street.
83rd Street, we should sell that. I mean, it's farmland, but we won't probably get our money back, but anywho, and then that one over there, but down 98th Street, I mean, doesn't accommodate enough people.
But some of that, that thinking that went into this plan was according to statutes as well. I mean, it wasn't just say, well, we ought to.
Well, of course,
here.
of course, of course.
We need to have an updated parking open space.
Well, I guess if your thoughts on where do you think the parking open space site should be and some analysis as to, potential demand, that would not be a bad idea. You don't have to do that prior to the town plan, but I can be helpful. And I don't know if you need to update your parking open space plan, but then it would drive here every 5-year update. So,
Yeah, we just typically update it when the grant comes available.
that's usually. So, yeah, I guess we had thoughts on, well, I did some kind of update on the parking space plan up there. It should be helpful to do that parking space plan. You can know what the potential demand might be and where things would make sense. Now, of course, that pushes your town plan finish line out further into.
I don't think we're on a timeline, I think the goal, speaking at the county meeting, our village was to have municipalities be done, so they could adopt their plan. But I don't know what their timeline is.
Yeah, so their timeline, I think they want to, so we're gonna actually, doing that kind of timeline, and the plan is to have to be finished, totally finished, for the county's plan, but certainly that makes the county's land plan that was completed or local updates virtually incorporated within the county's plan. Now, the county has a little bit of a unique way of doing things, is they actually do a implementation report every year, and they actually update our map every year, I believe. So they do an annual update of that map. I think it's sort of a routine basis. It may be helpful to have the village.
So what are you, I mean, obviously, I would assume that it wasn't. What are you looking for us, like, for the next step then, to go with one of the numbers, correct? And
Yeah, I think what was one of the numbers, and then what we would do once you, I don't have to say that tonight, obviously, but you go with one of the numbers and we can put together
Okay.
outline the basic thing we would do in the plan, the timeline for the plan.
okay,
And of course, as the plan gets larger, more complex timeline.
Sure.
More work to update and try to plan it as the report.
of course.
Those would be the next steps, is maybe kind of identify what you want to do, communicate that to me, and then we can.
Okay.
So I'm assuming what we need to do, Brad and I were just talking about it, four is what I think everybody's kind of leaning toward, to see everyone's head shaking. If that's what you want to do, we would ask them to present us with that. We would have Rich review it and then bring it back to the board for approval.
And Brad, that's what you're recommending, number 4? What about Plan Commission? What are you fellas and gals? 4? And the board?
Almost, well, I certainly am.
We budgeted for, let's go.
Right. Well,
We have 32 or thereabouts, 34 square miles and a brand new addition to the village and a new name and everything else. It's warranted a real dusting off of this thinking, and that is number 4.
okay. Any other comments or questions for McCabe? Mr. McCabe, is it?
Okay,
McCabe?
MCKAY. Okay.
Oh, McKay, okay. I
We do have our, I know you guys don't.
apologize.
We have our village planner order here. If you happen to have any questions or thoughts in regard to this, it's obviously going to be a huge part of this. So
Okay,
it's a pleasure to work with them. And that's a lot of new ideas, and a lot of perspectives. That's great. So.
Any other? Are we finished here? No questions? All right. Thank you very much for coming. We'll get in touch with you. Thank you. Oh.
We're done.
Oh.